What is mental health? Everyone is talking about it and seems to acknowledge that it's important. But what is it? If I sat across from you and I asked you to tell me how you understand mental health, how would you define it? How would you respond? I think for a lot of people, they don't understand mental health for themselves. The way that they understand mental health is when there's a crisis and it's posted on social media, let's say suicide, and then people start commenting mental health matters. But this same person who's writing mental health matters and showing concern that perhaps it should not have led to suicide or somebody unaliving themselves is probably going through a mental health challenge or even a mental illness, but has not actually recognized the indicators or the symptoms for the mental illness they're going through. For example, this person might have increased their alcohol intake secretly because they've started becoming socially anxious. Something happened at work that was embarrassing, humiliating, and it made them feel very small about themselves, so it lowered their self-esteem. And because they were not able to deal with that situation, it continued repeating itself in their mind and pervading different contexts in their lives. So they started feeling small at home, in their social circles. Everywhere they went, they felt small. And so to try and deal with that discomfort, they started increasing their alcohol use. And now they actually have what we call alcohol use disorder. They have all the symptoms, but they're trying as hard as possible to conceal this problem. And they don't call it, they don't think they're having a mental health challenge. They're not able to recognize that as a problem. Another person might be struggling with falling asleep. And so they go to the chemist over the counter and get maybe sleeping pills or supplements like melatonin. And the reason why they can't fall asleep is because they have these overwhelming, recurring thoughts that are worrying, frustrating, perhaps fearful. And so they're not able to calm themselves down, so they need something that can put them to sleep. They can't shut down their mind, so they need something to help them. But they're not looking at that as a mental health challenge. And I think then it's very important to come back to the basics and to try and understand mental health for ourselves. You as an individual, what is your mental health status? How can you assess yourself? So to define mental health, we can look at three main components: how we think, how we feel, how we behave. And our thoughts are our psychological aspect. It's our cognition, our perceptions. Then our feelings is the emotional aspect. And then how we behave is the social aspect. Now, these three components influence how we behave, how we interact with our surroundings, with people, in relationships. They influence how we function, how productive we are. They influence how we cope with difficult situations. They influence how we pursue perhaps our careers, our potential, our abilities, and how we use those productively to make positive contributions to the society. And so every day you're thinking, every day you're feeling, and every day you do something. So every single interaction that you have involves your mental health. And every single interaction can then indicate your mental health status. So if you have thoughts that are negative, thoughts that are, you think you're not good enough to be in the position you're in, and you've newly been appointed to that position, so you might be struggling with imposter syndrome, but then it persists for longer than what we expect imposter syndrome to last. We expect imposter syndrome to last for a short time after you go into a new position or a new place. So if yours is persisting, then you want to see what are the underlying factors that are perpetuating this imposter syndrome. Is it really imposter syndrome, or are you dealing with inferiority complex? And so when you're aware that your thoughts can affect your behavior, and this is on a day-to-day basis, on an interaction-to-interaction basis, on a situation-to-situation basis, then you're able to know at any given point what your mental health status is. So the example for the person with imposter syndrome, if they're aware of their thoughts, that they have negative thoughts that are defeating, thoughts that make them worried, thoughts that make them fearful. And so those thoughts can influence their behavior such that they start behaving in a less confident way. They start sitting in a way that depicts a very small person, a person who's not confident, who's not assertive in their position. And other people would see this and it would affect the way they relate with other people. Then they'd be able to know that something is wrong with my mental health and I need perhaps to talk to somebody about it, maybe a friend, or I need to see a therapist for this. Maybe I'm not very trustful in this particular point, so I'd rather talk to a professional who's going to guarantee that confidentiality. And so when you're able to define what mental health is, then you're able to see it every single day in your life. And you're able to take better care of it. You're able to know when your status is good, when your status is not good. On a day-to-day basis, our emotions get affected by things we expose our minds to. So if, for example, I wake up in the morning and I start reading an article or a Twitter post about somebody who was abused or a child who was sexually abused, and I follow the story, it's going to evoke a lot of emotions, especially if I have gone through something maybe similar. And so at the end of that post, I meet somebody who is rude to me. And so that aggravates whatever I'm already feeling. And now the next person I'm going to meet, it doesn't matter how they're going to be, I'm already defensive now because I think people are out to get me. And that started with just one post. And so if I'm aware that this thing I'm reading, this thing I'm watching is going to affect how I think, it's going to affect how I feel, and how I feel could then affect how I behave and how I act, how I speak to people, then when I'm aware, I know how to regulate. I know that these feelings that I have right now, these negative emotions that I'm experiencing right now, this resentment, this bitterness, this maybe envy, is because of something I read on the internet. And so when I meet somebody else, I'm able to regulate that emotion and be present to the person that I'm interacting with. But if I'm not aware of my feelings, of my thoughts, then I'm going to even be surprised at my behavior, at my actions, because I don't see the connection. And that's why you hear people say, that wasn't me, but that was you. You're just not paying attention to your thoughts and your feelings that then drove the behavior that you got into. So mental health is simply how you think, and you think every day, you think all the time when you're awake. How you feel every day, you feel every time when you're awake, and how you behave. You behave every time, you behave every day when you're awake. So every single day, check your mental health status. How are your thoughts? How are your feelings? How are you behaving? How do you speak? How do you dress? How do you walk? How do you relate with people? Those are your mental health indicators on a day-to-day basis.